predictions and prophecies were fulfilled in completely different ways, or in another way that the text is the same, but the message was understood in different ways. Baha'u'llah, in his epistle to the Son of the World, goes to the interpretation of the Quran, goes to the interpretation of the Old Testament and the New Testament. And when around the end of his life in 1898, 99, we start getting the conversion of the Jews and the Christians into the faith, the question of interpretation of the Bible became very, very good. I think the first group of the pilgrims who went from the West to visit Abdul-Baha in 1899, am I right? The first group arrived in 1899 at the turn of the century. They went to Abdul-Baha with tremendous amount of questions regarding the fulfillment of the Old Testament and New Testament. And from 1900 to 1921, 28th of November of that year when Abdul-Baha passed away, he basically dealt with the Western Baha'is on the question of interpretation of the Bible. Because they came from this Jewish background, from the Christian background, and they had this question in mind. What happened to the blood of Jesus Christ? What is the meaning of wine and bread? What is the verse of Matthew in this regard, and what does Luke says about that? And we have probably a few thousand tablets that were revealed by Abdul-Baha from 1900 to 1921 on these issues of interpretation of the Bible. Around more or less the same time, and a new element came into work, and that is the mass conversion of the Zoroastrians from Yazd and from Kerman and from Pune and different parts of India, and they had their own questions how the Avesta and the Zoroastrian manuscripts, Zoroastrian scriptures have to be understood and interpreted. And Abdul-Baha wrote, I think, about 800 tablets to the Baha'is from Zoroastrian background who had this kind of questions. Another area of interpretation that is very important, and I had the privilege of working with this part of it for the past 3 decades, is the interpretation of Persian and Arabic poetry, which is found in the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdul. And last night I just told you that the 5th volume is now finished, and it's about 2,500 pages of work that has to do with the understanding and interpretation of the Persian poetry that have been commented by Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha in their writings. Abdul-Baha in his own way. Am I taking too much of your time? Are you interested in this stuff? We are together to waste some time and have a good time. So I hope I can create a good time. When we come to Abdul-Baha, he becomes really the master of interpretation and writing commentaries. And he was, to my rough estimation, he was about 22 that he wrote his first work, which is a commentary on an Islamic tradition, hadith of I was a hidden treasurer, I wanted to be known, I created therefore the universe to be known. This famous tradition on the authority of the Prophet, or is a controversial issue, who's this hadith from. But anyhow, when he was in Adrianople, and that was, let's say, 1864, he was born in 1844, 1864, it means 21 years of age. And a thinker of the time, in Adrianople, is Ali Shevkat Pasha. Ali Shevkat Pasha was a man of government and political leader, but he had inclinations for mysticism. The third one here. He's philosopher, theologian, mystics, mysticism, and then we have lawyers and doctors of Sharia. He raised this question about the interpretation of this famous tradition, and Baha'u'llah, I think he wanted to put Abdullah into practice or lead him towards writing and thinking, and a part of educational approach of Baha'u'llah towards his son. He left the question for Abdullah to answer. And believe or not, he created a masterpiece at the age on the commentary that he wrote on this famous tradition of the Prophet. كنت كنزا مخفيا فأحببت أن أعرف فخلقت الخلق. Like I go up. This is the text of the tradition. Then we see that Abdul Baha was asked by the Muslim believers who came to the faith, by Christian and Jews who went to him or who heard about him and wrote to him about Old Testament and New Testament, and then we have questions of the Baha'is from Zoroastrian background who wrote to him and asked about their own scriptures. And then we see that thousands of tablets as a result of this correspondence. We have about 30,000 tablets written by Abdullah. And probably 1/3 of that sums up to about several thousand tablets, in a way, has directly or indirectly has to do with the interpretation of the Holy Scriptures. So we are having a mass amount of literature that is produced by Abdul Baha as a result of the conversion of these people to the faith on the question of understanding the Bible. Now, I just come to my point. I think this is enough for the introduction to the question of interpretation. Now, the most important development in this regard happened in 1906-07. We don't know exactly what and when, but a great lady whose station, whose intellectual capacities, whose attitude, whose love for understanding is not known to us by the name Laura Clifford Barney, came to Haifa and became present at the luncheon and sat with Abdul Baha, and she raised this question face to face, and Abdul Baha explained the answers, and that became the some answered questions. Again, we don't know how many sessions they were together, but Clifford Barney, I think, totally, probably more than a year, on and off, he was at the presence of Abdul Baha. And it seems to me that she was with an admirable intellectual capacity and creative mind and solid question and love for understanding, not the Old Testament, not the New Testament as such, but her range of questions goes to morality, goes to social problems, goes to the understanding of the manifestations of God, goes to the human spirit and the capability of human mind and the everlasting life, and how the quality of life of a person can be improved. These are the thinkings and the questions that she has raised with Abdul